Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lever Movement Podcast. I am your host, Evan. Today I am joined by my friend, Brian Schroy. Brian, how are you doing today?
I am great. How are you?
Fantastic. We got to get a little track session in earlier today, so I was super excited to see you earlier. Now I'm excited to be able to talk to you on the Lever podcast. You're a podcast expert and a certified podcast pro. You've been on many a running podcast, so people might recognize you. But the thing that I'm interested in always when I talk to runners, but especially your journey into running, is the thing I think people will be super fascinated with. Can you start us off by just telling us how you got into running in general?
Yeah, definitely. I got into running a bit by accident. After I graduated from the University of Colorado, I graduated with a degree and about 50 extra pounds. So I decided I wanted to get my life together a little bit, moved to New York, and continued actually having more of a unhealthy lifestyle because there is just a little too many activities to do and long nights. But I found myself boxing a little bit to get into shape, and that's kind of where I found my introduction into fitness. So I decided to try my luck at boxing and sign up for my first amateur fight. And 2 seconds into my first fight, I tore my shoulder. So that was a very short-lived boxing career. And the first thing I could do was run. And my girlfriend, now my wife, was training for the Boston Marathon. So I just kind of decided I was going to jump in on all of her runs. And I slowly realized that running wasn't so bad. And I might actually be decent at it. And, lo and behold, we've been going at it pretty hard for the last 5 years. And yeah, I got the bug, as they like to say.
What was the thing or like the way you thought about running before you got into because you jumped straight into like marathon training and like you said, joining your wife for her marathon training and stuff. What was your preconception of what training for running was?
I, especially in the competitive atmosphere of New York City, where you have really two main places to run, along the river or in Central Park, everyone seems to be racing all the time. So I would go out, maybe try to run 2 miles if I just needed something to do in the morning, to kill some time before work. And if I were to run, it was about 2 miles all out. And I didn't enjoy it very much. But when I was able to, take my time, and I actually, coming up time sensitive over here, I signed up with for the Boulder as my first race ever. And I ran 7 miles as my training run because I didn't know how much 10K was. So the week before Boulder, I was like, I'm going to run 7 miles. I think that's a 10K. And I did that and it sucked. And then when I actually went to race the Boulder, I realized it was less than that. And it went by so fast and it was so fun. And I got to eat bacon and take Jello shots. And after that, I was like, oh, 6 miles isn't so bad. So that was kind of my first glimpse of running and racing. And then when I got injured and started joining my wife on these runs, that's kind of where I found the joy, where we could, settle into more of a conversational pace and, maybe take stops, maybe stop at the light and not jog in place and realize that that's okay. Also, the benefits of getting to enjoy Sour Patch Kids along the way was great incentive to get out the door.
Yeah, definitely different than just going out for that 2 mile all out session and then absolutely hating the way you feel afterwards too. So you signed up for some local races. For people that aren't in Boulder or don't know, the Boulder 10K is what, like a 50,000 person 10K or something like that.
It's a
on
big one.
Memorial
It's one
Day.
of the biggest.
One of the biggest 10Ks in the United States, at least. It's very difficult at altitude, but it's coming up this next Monday too. So definitely very time sensitive as well. The thing that I'm curious about is the journey, again, from, running those 2 mile all out sessions to joining, for some marathon training, to actually getting into a structured training program and finding that you enjoyed like trying to get faster and stuff. Can you talk us maybe through the next 1 or 2 years and maybe your first marathon and how that sort of training journey went for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, I did Boulder as a fun run with some friends. But the first race that I like properly trained for was the New York City Marathon. I still was coming off some rehab for the shoulder, but I hadn't quite given up the dream. So I was still doing boxing a little bit for fitness. So I started running twice a week, just 6 miles. And then I would do a long run on the weekend, and I would do the boxing class in between my easy runs. So that was my original structure. I think it took me another 1 to 2 years before I actually joined a running group and learned about workouts. And that's when I started adding a little bit more mileage. Maybe boxing was taking a little bit of a back seat. So I'd say I was probably running more like 5 days a week with 2 workouts a week and 1 long run. And now that I've gotten faster and more serious, it's more of a 1 to 2 times a day with workouts twice to 3 times a week.
And you've, probably, I imagine, drastically increased your mileage. You've tried different types of workouts, types of different training programs. How has your, race performance improved, or how has it, progressed over the past years as you've gotten a little bit more, dedicated into the structured training and trying different things and running with different groups?
Yeah, I think for my first marathon, I was maxing at around 35 miles, but getting by. Now I'm maxing out a little closer, probably around 110.
110 miles a week.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I hated when people would tell me that I should run more. I was very comfortable with my schedule, but as soon as I ramped up my mileage, and I'm not saying anyone has to run 110 miles, but even when I started running 50 miles or 60 miles and changing nothing else, that's when I saw drastic improvements. And then when you start incorporating, some speed work, some stuff at threshold, some marathon specific workouts, that's kind of where I saw even more of an improvement. So now I've been building year after year, and it was probably 35 miles the first cycle, and then 50, 60, and then we got into that 70, 80, and now it's built into, 90, 100 plus miles a week. But it did not come overnight. It was a steady build from 2016 to now.
Is it safe to say that your primary focus and primary distance is the marathon?
I would say so. As someone who found running later in life and jumped straight into the marathon, I kind of feel like my slow twitch muscles agree with me a little more than my fast twitch muscles.
Yeah. How have you, I guess, progressed in your race times at the marathon, specifically since you ran your first one in New York City, and then your most recent one was the Boston Marathon? How has that sort of progression gone for you as you've, like you said, gone from 35 miles a week with not too much speed work or intensive runs all the way up to peaking at 110 miles a week?
Absolutely. Well, I first ran the New York City Marathon, and I signed up with a friend. So when my wife and I started training, she was training for Boston, but I obviously did not have a Boston qualifier. So I just wanted to do one marathon, and then I was going to be done. So many people said I was going to get the marathon bug and never be able to stop. And I was like, nope, I'm going to fix my shoulder. I'm going to get back into boxing. So my friend and I prepared for the New York City Marathon. I trained. I told you how I trained. I trained for 3 days a week. I added a mile to my long run every week until I was at like 20 miles and called it good. But I still ran, every single week for 16 weeks until the start line of New York. And I think my friend did 2 long runs, and that was it. So we started out together. We got to about the Queensboro Bridge, and that's when he just turned white. And I I realized that we were not going to be finishing the race together. So with that, I still ran, I think 3:18, definitely being held back from my friend, but I was very happy with that time. All things considered, I think that's a great debut marathon. But then I started thinking, like, that's not that far off from, 3 hours, which was the Boston qualifier at the time. I think with a little more training, a few more miles, and no one holding me back for the first 15 miles, I could actually qualify for Boston. So I ended up signing up for the Vancouver Marathon. I definitely went out way too hot and learned my lesson about pacing that day. But I ran 2:58 and qualified for Boston. Then, for some reason, I thought it was a great idea to run Chicago, which was on my birthday. So everyone loves a good birthday marathon. And there I ran 2:52 to better my time heading into Boston. And that's when I decided it was time to get a coach and find a team and actually start doing some workouts. So from there, I ran Boston 2018, which was the brutal headwind and freezing rain year. I was one of the few people to walk away with a PR that year. So I ran 2:44, which, on the day I think was very impressive. And then I ran CIM that following December and ran 2:30. And then I got stuck in a little 2:30 curse. I had a little 2:30 curse going on where every marathon I ran, I was PRing, but I was PRing by like 9 seconds. So I bested my 2:30 in CIM in London, where I was in the back of the charity wave. So I still thought that was my best marathon, but with all the weaving, I added up some mileage and fatigued a little more and ended up running 2:30.24, I think. And then I ran CIM. The altitude, or the humidity, not the altitude, caught up to me. I got really sick and still decided to finish the race and ran 2:30.14. So was really loving those 2:30s.
I think a lot of people would take a 2:30 curse if they had an option to be able to run nothing but a 2:30 marathon for a couple of years in a row too. What was the next couple of races like after you ran? So CIM is the California International Marathon for people who haven't run it, but after you ran that race, what was the next couple of races you ran in that specific marathon progression you did?
Well, I mean, there were some boulders in there, but after CIM was kind of when the world shut down. So I started building heavy in my training and getting really fit, but I had nothing to really race. So that was back with a lot of time trials, really taking advantage of that altitude conversion. But it was, a lot of training for very few events for a few years. And then the next big race I got to do was the Chicago Marathon, which, if you were unfamiliar with the conditions of that day, we had a brutally hot, brutally humid day. They had the flag system out. So it started with yellow, which is like, warning, be very careful. Conditions are not great. And then we got to about mile 7 and all the flags had turned to red. Like, you should probably abort your mission right now. So, that was another rough day, and I ran 2:33. And I think, running somewhere near my PR on that day was, a pretty great day for the conditions. But finally, I got a little bit of redemption in Boston after a tough training block. And I think we're going to talk a lot about that on this podcast. But I was dealing with some really bad plantar fasciitis. I had some dental issues. And after, being pretty uncertain whether I was going to race about 3 weeks before the marathon, I broke my 2:30 curse and ran 2:28 in Boston.
That must be pretty special. Pulling back the curtains here a little bit, I was there on the day and saw Brian with about 2 miles left, and I was cheering very, very, very much to, you know, his success and everything as he went by. But I think that that's something a lot of people identify with after they hit a plateau for a little bit. And in marathoning, it can kind of seem cruel like that, where, like you mentioned in Chicago, the conditions play so much of a factor, and you build up in all this training in years and years and years, and then just if nothing, you know, clicks perfectly on the day, yeah, you run a little bit off your PR. But then when that moment finally comes, even if the marathon starts to get really, really difficult at the end, you still, you know, crush your old PR. The thing that I am, again, yes, very interested in to talk about is your training block leading up to Boston. Boston is a you know, April marathon, and that typically means in the northern hemisphere you're going to have to deal with some sort of cold conditions or snow or bad footing outside. And so a lot of people normally will run on the treadmill, but you had some specific issues that led you to incorporate lever and body weight support in your training too. Can you maybe talk us through your experience coming up with plantar fasciitis, and then how you kind of navigated those few weeks? Like you said, the last 3 weeks, you didn't even know if you were going to race. How did you deal with that situation?
Yeah, well, to argue your point a little bit, Boulder is pretty good when it comes to winter running, all things considered. We do get a fair amount of snow, but the first thing they clear is the bike path. So it might not be the most ideal conditions, but you can get away with running outdoors almost every day, which, you know, can cause problems on its own because, as you mentioned, you know, you're dealing with bad footing and uneven surfaces. And, you know, we run out in Boulder on the dirt roads by the farms a lot, and they can just kind of become these rutted, washboard, pothole filled roads until about midway through summer when they come in and start hosing them down and plowing them. But conditions are definitely not great. And I started noticing some foot issues going into the Chicago Marathon, actually. So this plantar fasciitis issue has been going on for a while, but it was kind of misdiagnosed. I have poor range of motion in my big toe, which apparently is genetic. So all things were pointing towards bad toe mobility and tight calves, but it ended up being classic plantar fasciitis, which does not like to go away overnight. So I had done some cross training, tried some, you know, getting back into my boxing just for conditioning and keeping fitness high. But definitely tried to take a couple weeks off here and there to get my foot feeling better. And it really never went away. So I realized that Lever conveniently is located in Boulder, Colorado. And I decided to drop by the office one day and see if I could pick one up. And I took one run on it, taking out a fair amount of body weight. But that day, like first run, I was able to run without feeling my foot at all. And that's when I, you know, realized that I could incorporate it into my training and take a lot of the stress out of my, a lot of my easy runs, you know, my recovery miles, especially. We meet as a group, so it was always nice to be able to continue to meet as a group. But, you know, the next day when my body was feeling tired and, you know, I might be more restless and, you know, focusing less on my form, that was when I really started incorporating Lever into my schedule. I'd say bi-weekly at least. I started doing about 2 runs on it. And then as I was getting treatment for my foot, good old shockwave therapy, which is very effective, but very painful. Kind of after you deal with that treatment, your foot just doesn't feel great for the next couple of days. So to be able to jump on the lever and take that pain away and still be able to run without missing any training was super helpful.
I feel like a lot of people can identify with that situation because, you know, marathon training, any training in general, has its ups and downs and has those periods where you might, yeah, be dealing with a certain type of specific injury, but especially marathon training and especially the last month where sometimes you're just thinking like, what can I do to get to the line. And so, yeah, you mentioned the convenience that the Lever office is, near downtown Boulder, a pretty convenient location. What was the thing that maybe pushed you over the edge to consider using body weight support? Because a lot of people have seen, the concept of body weight support over the past few years, and it is something that more and more people are incorporating, not only for rehab from injuries, but incorporating into their overall run training, like you mentioned. But what was that moment or that thing that made you say, hey, you know what? I'm a few weeks out from the marathon. I need to start incorporating this, or I need to try something. What was that sort of moment for you?
Yeah, we were doing some 3-minute repeats. I think we were scheduled to do 8 by 3 minute repeats. And I got to about 4. And I said that I think I needed to change my shoes because they just weren't feeling good. And then I got to my 5th rep and I realized that the shoes were not going to make the situation any better. And then I got to my 6th rep and I dropped out of the workout. And as soon as I realized that I was unable to do my basic work, that's when I realized I need to find an alternative. And that's kind of when I started exploring options. I knew some people who had used Lever or were familiar with it. So I started exploring that option. And luckily, the Lever office was, like I said, conveniently located, and they let me try it on and showed me how it worked. And I walked out with a Lever about 5 minutes later. I was sold as soon as I felt the difference, and just seeing what, the different variations even of body weight resistance, whether you're taking up 5 pounds all the way up to 50 pounds, like you can notice the difference and find that kind of happy medium. The days that my foot hurt a lot, I would take off more weight. And the days that I just wanted a little bit of a break, I could run close to my full body weight.
I feel like that is pretty common too in marathon training, that you'll get something that pops up and it is manageable to run through maybe on some of the easy days, and then on the workouts it flares up a little bit, but you don't have to fully stop all of your training. So to be able to incorporate body weight support, especially like you mentioned, those days after a hard workout where you're going to be recovering anyway, and you don't necessarily need to be putting on all of your full body weight, and you can kind of take a little bit of a stressor off, and it promotes that recovery. That is a way it fits in perfectly, especially when you are just trying to manage and get to the start line, so then you can get to the finish line, and then maybe take some well-earned rest too. So let's say you finished the Boston training block, you ran Boston. When you get your foot cleared up, or you overcome sort of a type of injury, how could you imagine incorporating body weight support? Or do you have a plan for your next training block on how you can use Lever now that it's on your treadmill in your basement gym? How would you imagine being able to utilize something like that in your training routine?
Yeah, I've already been using a lot, especially returning to sport, and not from injury, but from the beat up that the marathon, especially the Boston Marathon, left on my legs. So just, those first couple runs, I figured, why would I want to wreck my body even more when I can hop on the Lever and, start out with 30 minutes and then maybe 60 minutes. And now, even as I'm kind of back into my normal schedule, I'm still starting my build from scratch. So just kind of, after a long run, I've been using it on my Sunday runs, 1 to 2 days a week for about an hour. And I'm also using it more on my double. So, if you're a crazy person like me or Evan, and are doing second runs, just getting some extra mileage under your feet without all the wear and tear has been great. And so far it's been a wonderful tool, but I'm sure we'll talk about this in a little bit. But living at altitude, it's just a little harder to run. I have run now 2:28 in the marathon, and my easy days are very rarely below 8-minute pace. I like to go slow and steady as much as I can. And some days, if I'm just looking to go a little faster, I can do that on the lever. And I feel much better about doing it with with that apparatus than doing it outside.
Right. Then showing up, my favorite thing in Boulder especially is showing up to a run with, a friend who's feeling good and pushes the pace on the easy day. And
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard to take off some of your body weight outside, but it's very easy and convenient to do when you're running, that solo easy run or that double. You mentioned the altitude aspect, which I think is super interesting because a lot of people will maybe visit places like Boulder or Flagstaff or other places around the world that are famous training locations that happen to be at higher altitude and notice that they have to run slower for the same effort. So it's almost one of those pitfalls that you get into coming out to a great training location that happens to have a little bit less oxygen, a little bit different pressure, and it ends up being harder to run it. But then when you go to sea level, you can all of a sudden run faster. But if you haven't practiced running at those faster speeds, it feels a little sluggish, or you don't feel fully coordinated at it. So what type of angle might you recommend, or could you think about using, something like lever and body weight support to maybe practice running a little bit faster to prepare for sea level races?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've been using lever as my cheat code. Like I said, even on my easy runs, when I get back to sea level, I am always feeling good. So, those easy runs will definitely dip down into that 7-minute pace range, maybe high sixes, but I can definitely do that and feel better about doing it when I'm on the lever up here without that wear and tear. But also, it's very hard to kind of hit some of those paces when you're running and training at altitude. Marathon pace. I think I'm a high responder to altitude, or coming down to sea level from altitude.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I can even get up to 30 or 15 seconds different from marathon pace up here to down at sea level. Mm-hmm. And, that doesn't necessarily help get your legs turning over better. So I've been trying to use lever more and more on some of my intervals and even just strides to get more comfortable getting my legs to turn over the same way they would at sea level. Because especially we run out a lot of dirt, which kind of slows you down. It's good for the body, but you just can't turn it quite over like you would if you were at sea level on pavement. So getting on the treadmill and, kind of setting it to where I want to be, and being able to equate it with a little less resistance definitely has helped me feel more confident going into workouts at sea level.
Yeah.
Or races at sea level.
Exactly. Next, and one of the last questions I have too is, what are your big goals that you might have to practice running a little bit faster at altitude for sea level? Do you have any goal races coming up, or any sort of benchmarks or milestones that you'd like to break in the next few years?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously super proud of Boston, but that was off a tough training block. So now that I have lever as this tool, I think I can get back and have a really good training block. Kind of during the beginning of the pandemic, I was feeling the fittest I've ever felt. And really it was kind of looking to be more at that sub 225 range, maybe even sub 223 range. And then kind of hit the reset button after Chicago and just never felt that fitness quite the same. So I think that, next I have Berlin, the Berlin Marathon in September, where I would really love to break 225. I think Boston's a very hilly course and Berlin's a flat course. So it shouldn't be as crazy as it sounds, but the paces are getting faster and faster. And like I mentioned earlier on this podcast, I'm a slow twitch muscle kind of guy. So I really need to work on my turnover more so than my endurance, and start knowing what it feels like to run fast and get comfortable with those faster speeds. So 225 to sub 223 is still kind of the next milestone, but ultimate goal would be U.S. Olympic trials, either this block or next block.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. If people want to keep up to date with your training, where is the best place to maybe follow along as you continue to make strides towards those next big marathon goals?
Yeah, on Instagram and Twitter, I am at Schroy, just my last name, SCHROY. And then I'm also out there on Strava, and I try to post everything. So no secrets here.
No secrets. Brian, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it. We wish you the best of luck in this next training block as well. And we love to hear the different perspectives, especially your marathon progression and that trajectory, dropping 50 minutes over the course of your first marathon to your most recent marathon with still a little bit of room left to go. I think in that runway too is so inspiring too. And we wish you the best of luck and can't wait to see all the rest of the progression. That wraps it up for this episode. Brian, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. We'll see everybody next time. Have a great one. Bye-bye.